Welcome to episode 155 of The Route. The Route is a glorified coffee chat that takes you from A to B with a new guest every episode. I'm your host, Christopher Nascimento, and before we begin, just a couple things to cover. First off, where the pod is available, so you can find it on all major podcast networks. I believe there's about 9 at the moment, but for those that aren't aware, it's like Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, and a couple other ones as well. But if you're interested in following via YouTube and you want to see the video, you can check us out at the Routecast there. And that's the same handle you can find us for all social media. And each week when we have a guest coming out, we post a little magazine cover that's unique to them so you can get an idea what that episode will be about. But yeah, with that, you can check us out at the Routecast. Check us out on all platforms. Subscribe, follow, rate 5 stars, like our posts. Just allows us to grow a little bit easier. But with that now said, let's get into today's guest. Today's guest is brought to you by Zoom. In the world of partnerships, there's a simple principle: you adapt or you die. In this fast-paced industry, you can't afford to miss a beat, and that's where Zoom will help you win each and every time. Zoom provides premier real-time data insights for partnerships across broadcast, streaming, and social like no one else. They're always ready, and detailed analytics help you get the upper hand and save time in your day-to-day reporting. So, if you're ready to upgrade your reporting today, make the smart choice and choose Zoom. With that, today's guest. I'd now like to welcome a guest that has worked their way up through the food and beverage industry, from sales, marketing, to managing physical locations as well. With that, I'd now like to welcome the Director of Business Development at Dunrobin Distilleries, Adam Malmberg. Welcome to the Route. How's it going?
Hey, good to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as the name of the podcast says, it's called The Route for a reason. So do you mind maybe taking us, through your journey? Where did it begin and how do you get to where we are now?
Well, I guess the journey really began systematically with McDonald's, actually. When I was about 14, I started working at McDonald's and kind of saw my way, kind of working in the hospitality industry all the way through. And if anybody's ever worked in the fast food biz, McDonald's was kind of like the blueprint that led me kind of each step of my way into the industry, and it gave me a lot of drive, and it gave me a lot of experience with prioritizing and a lot of like time management and just multitasking skills that they developed a really strong training program there. And even post working there in any of my other ventures, I've always found people that either have worked in the industry, worked in hospitality, worked in the fast food industry, or barista to be some of the best people to kind of garner that as kind of fundamentals. But so started from there, and that was again when I was, like I said, I was 14 years old, and then kind of moved out into bigger and better things. With worked my next real big time gig was at Lone Star Texas Grill when I was about 19, and I worked there for about 3 years, getting the ins and outs of one of the busiest establishments in the city. I worked at the original one on Baseline and Fisher, and there kind of really grew. Really kind of also let my break out of my shell a little bit with kind of interaction and the staff. And the staff were part of the framework there. They had been there for many of them been there for almost a decade, and kind of breaking into um, that spot in general was something to see. And the money became part of it as well. Like when you're 19 years old and you're making 300-400 bucks a night, it gets intoxicating a little bit, and you kind of get into this lifestyle a little bit where it becomes a little bit entranceful, and you really start to put your eye on what this industry is about and where you kind of want to go, and do you want to be a part of it, or do you want to um, really utilize it to put yourself through school and everything, because it becomes that stepping stone where you can work 3, maybe 4 shifts a week and pay your rent, pay your tuition. You can have some lifestyle and go out, but it's an opportunity that gets you into a different pay grade than just working like a 9 to 5 retail. It's like I said, it becomes addictive almost. That cash in hand, and that's kind of really what enticed me in the industry, being able to travel, school, and everything. But it educated me along the way. I like to call it a paid education, my way through the industry. And from there, I started working more of corporate gigs after I left Lone Star. I worked several different places, Moxie's, Milestones through Kara as well. Moxie's was one that really led me into the management role. I used to open new stores from Toronto and Ottawa at several Moxie's locations. So it gave me kind of more fundamentals in a corporate framework, and really kind of developing those skills and what the restaurant industry and the industry in general was about. Framework as just how to delegate, how to really manage and structure. And the most important thing I took away from that whole kind of corporate scene with the Moxie Group, which I think does several things extremely well. One thing is they taught me how to set atmosphere, which in the restaurant industry is everything. It's that fundamental that takes you from a restaurant that's not doing very well to one that can really set the bar higher. And it's not always just in the food; it's the atmosphere and the picture that it sets for the guests when they come in. And that's really the way that they show you they want people to be treated like guests like at your house. So it was that structure that really kind of set me on my path to developing me wanting more of the from the industry and getting up higher in the industry. So from there, I went on to general manage a couple of places such as Lieutenant's Pump, which is a staple on Elgin Street. I was there for about 3.5 years. I saw it through some infancies in the sense of they were trying to redevelop and rebrand, and I kind of had some hand in redoing that with them, trying to bring them into more of a social after hour scene, just besides being their local watering hole. And it garnered really well. John Kous taught me a lot. That's a lot of hands-on work and what it takes for time management to really get in there and get that experience and really kind of develop any kind of framework and the sacrifices it takes to develop a high-end and functional brand. John was there every day, and he did the little things, and that's you to really to have a successful business. You need to know the little things. You need to know how to do it better. So when people have questions, you have the answers. You need to know the ins and outs of your business better than anybody, and that's what I really took from John. And so it was kind of a flip flop back from the corporate world as the industry to like independence, and I took everything away that I could from garnering those different experiences, and which kind of led me to going again back and forth to a little bit of ownership with smoke over a restaurant called Zazaza, which I was a partner in, and then from there I went to more of a again back to the corporate world with Kerrigan with Beer Market, and going from there to Central Beer House. And where it was in Central Beer House and Beer Market, I really developed a love for spirits in general and really dictating and teaching about spirits. You get your Prud'homme, which is kind of your beer certificates, and then your Cicerone, which is your stages 1, 2, and 3, where you can actually start to teach classes and judge beer. And then you develop the sense, and we did a bunch of YouTubes about working with beer and what the different profiles of beer and everything like that. And I was able to host many beer dinners and education seminars through there. And why that's important is for my journey is because that's what kind of led me to consulting. I had opened restaurants. I had been through the knowledgeability with beer and a lot with kind of mixology with cocktails, running programs for like Central Beer House, like designing their beer Bible and everything, and really putting the time in with the staff. And then spirits were kind of newer on the scene. The whole industry had transferred from like the mid '90s to wine really being at the forefront and people really getting into pairings and everything. Whereas the craft movement in beer was starting to develop and taking everything that told us from Europe over to, to the North American marketplace. We saw places like Bose open up and become at the forefront of the craft movement in basically North America. Beer was on its uptake, and that's kind of where I was falling into it with Central Beer House and teaching, coaching, and everything like that. Um, but what it really saw was the different transitions in the industry, kind of like how you see fashion kind of recycle itself.
Yeah.
You saw these kind of movements come back into the fray where it wasn't just the bad 50s and everything was coming back. People were trying to garner this sense of community and really bring this local pride of like you got great places like Kitchissippi and coming up and like Beyond the Pale, really starting to set a precedent for different type of profiles in education. People were really guarding to this, and so from there, I started my own consulting company. Was doing turnkey operations and helping people with beer education and restaurant education on how to turn like your place was struggling or if you were looking to expand on anything, these were the steps to follow or these are the ways to go. These are the blueprints to follow. And from there, I got introduced to now my partner, co-founder, Adrian Spitzer, and our former partner, Mark, and Jonathan Hatchell. We started Dunrobin Distilleries out of a relationship that I garnered with the Pelican fishery on Bank and Heron. I had done a bunch of work for Jim and Mark there, and Adrian was looking for someone to come up with some experience in the industry, and not as a partnership to start off with, but more as some guidelines because he had an idea that he wanted to distill, and no one had really kind of progressed in that marketplace yet. We had the wine movement, we had the craft breweries, but the spirits were still in its real infancy for craft, in the purpose of craft. And he was really wanting to put them together. He had a long interest in distilling itself, but didn't know the ins and outs of like the AGCO, the LCBO, and the industry as a marketplace. Because really that industry is the wild, wild west if you're coming from a different corporate world. It takes a roadmap to get through it, So I was able to lend some expertise and help, and we came to a choice where they asked me to come on as a partner and a co-founder for Dunrobin Distilleries. So we set the roadmap and we started humming along, and it was a long process in the sense of it seems short now because almost 7 years have gone by like that. But when you're sitting in a garage in Dunrobin on a couch with almost like a milk canister of a still that we just created to create some product and some processes and everything like that, to fast forward now to taking over Bankley Kill, which is the old Bose facility, and almost 36,000 square feet. Sorry, it's quite wild to see the transition and where the marketplace has gone. But it all started with kind of them wanting to get into this industry and my knowledge about a lot of different facets of the industry and working together and utilizing our different strengths to really get this thing steamrolling and moving forward. We brought in Jonathan Hatchell, who's a legend in the restaurant industry itself, and it really wouldn't have gone on unless he had wanted to invest and become a partner. He's really one of the ones that got this drink started stirring. He knew where all the bodies were buried in the city. Like he knew how to get that seed money started, to get us kind of going, to get that operational costs and the connections that he had founded from being the CEO of the Royal Oak, which was one of the biggest pub groups in Eastern Ontario. Get going, he garnered a lot of respect and a lot of goodwill amongst everybody in the industry. So we really couldn't have done it without him and the knowledge and patience and everything that he done. And I even look to him as more of a mentor than anything, than just a partner. He's guided my process along, and still to this day, where we are. So it's been a lot of fun. But that kind of brings us to where we are now and how we first kind of started. But how it really started going, because the interesting part with our transition and our route was COVID was such a big part of it. How we developed our company with Dunrobin Distilleries. We were starting to get our licensing together, which is quite tedious. The AGCO really discourages tire kickers when it comes to um, getting approved for a license. And there's a reason why you don't. Well, there's a reason why you didn't see as many um, independent rides and everything like that, because there's a lot of fees involved. There's um, a lot of systematically intricacies that the AGCO really makes you jump through the hoops for. It's starting at some points to get a little better, but it is still tough. So in those processes, as we were starting to develop them and starting to get all of our licensing together, and we were starting to age some whiskeys, but we knew we had to get something to market. And vodka and gin were those catalysts that we were trying to launch through. But in that, COVID comes, and nothing was going to kill the restaurant industry except for a pandemic. You could have a recession, but people are still going to go out and eat and drink and everything like that. But a pandemic, you're handcuffed. You can't do anything. So there was a call to action from the government and to produce sanitizer for anybody that had a license to do that. We had just gotten our license, so we put together a program to do not only just sanitizer, but the best sanitizer I truly still believe on the marketplace that we could have done. And I think it showed in some of the customers that we were able to obtain during that process. People like the City of Ottawa, the Ottawa Hospital, Giant Tiger, which was our biggest client, and I can't thank them for enough for taking a chance with a small little group like us, and Loblaws. It helped get us through, and it helped get us a lot of starter capital as well, getting those sanitizers in. Now, um, the margins in sanitizer were really good, and if we could have kept doing it, I think we would have. But our whole process and focus was on doing the dark spirits, but those have to age and they take a process. So you make vodka and gin at that point, and we started winning awards, and we were able to launch almost everything simultaneously because the pandemic gave us time. As funny as that is, something that was so tragic in a lot of ways, it gave us time to develop our processes, and it really enabled us to develop our whiskey. Start to really process with the rum and launch our first series of spirits in the 2022, 2021, 2022 is when we first, the Christmas there, started to launch some of our mainstay products, and it really helped us get going.
Yeah, that's quite the route to date, and to be honest, that's when I kind of found out about Dunrobin as well, where
Yeah.
I have like what is it, the whiskey ginger cans? Those are my favorite whenever I go to the LCBO. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
quite the yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I said those ones were, that was an interesting story as well. That was specifically developed in a partnership deal that we had done with OSEG. So
Oh,
the
okay.
Operations Entertainment Group at TD Place, and a conversation I had with a buddy of mine named Matt Bennett, who had previously worked at I interned at the Ottawa Senators, and I'd known Matty from there, and he's done a lot of corporate development and partnership work along. He's like the head of corporate partnerships with OSEG. But I had told him one day, just like, "Hey, Matty, I'm starting a distillery." He's like, "Oh, Adam, that's great." Like, it's like, "Oh, all sunshine and rainbows." But he's like, "Let me know when you guys start developing things." And it was about 2 years later where we had product and we had inventory, where it was like, "Okay, now it's time to have a serious conversation, kind of take us seriously. You guys have a great farmers or Christmas market." I apologize that it was coming back after COVID, and we wanted to jump on and be a part of. And they really opened the doors to us and took a chance on young guys, because they were all with big, inner agencies and groups before, like Seagrams and like 40 Creeks and the Campari groups and stuff like that. So to take a shot with a local was pretty positive. And we had explored and we had seen where the trends were going, and it was the cans. the RTDs, if you will, the ready to drinks, the ready to drink cocktails. And we wanted to launch something with a bang, and we knew that that was the perfect vehicle. With that partnership, that vehicle, because a lot of sports venues are pretty beer forward, and I don't blame them. Have a pint, you're enjoying it. It's handheld, and you don't have to think. You know, so to take that kind of risk and then give us that opportunity, we had to nail it. Our whiskey had just won at the San Francisco Worlds the gold and the bronze, and we had to launch this product. And it had to stand on its own pedestal, but it had to be representative of what the product was. We couldn't launch it and be like, you know what I mean? You have one shot to really launch a product and really get into the hands of people because they try it once and it's kind of like, they're probably not going to try it again, or if they do try it again, it's almost by accident. You get one chance at that. So we had to make sure it was a great representation of that. And having my years in the industry, I was at a place where it's almost like you take Frank's Red Hot sauce, and it's good for everybody that is just getting into hot sauces or spiciness. But those people that really like hot sauce, it's kind of like their ketchup. Do you know what I mean? It's approachable to everybody. We wanted to make it something that was approachable, so we didn't want to make it too sweet. We didn't want to make it, you know, too rife for it, but we knew we had to have that right kick. And that vehicle of OSAG and TD Place Stadium was the perfect way to do it. And now we have two of four of our RTDs in there, our gin and grapefruit, and our rye and ginger. So sorry, Chris, I cut you off, but
Yeah, no, that's perfect. To be honest, I love kind of hearing about that because that's actually the can I love to drink just when I go to an event at OSEG. And as I was mentioning, I'm just across the street. And funny enough, I like Matt Bennett's a great person. I actually saw him at the gym the other day too. So
yeah,
he's a great guy. But yeah, I guess going back to your route, it's so cool just to hear kind of everything you've been able to do to date so far. And obviously, I want to dive into all these different elements a bit further. What I typically like doing is let's go back to the beginning. We'll work our way to where we are now. And
sure.
going back to those initial few roles that you had, right? And I find, doing this for 150 plus episodes now, it usually seems like when people are in that initial role that they're in, everyone's kind of just figuring it out, if that makes sense, right? It sounds like maybe people have an
Absolutely.
idea in their head, but then it often never occurs, right? Because they have these different experiences and they realize, hey, no, this is what I actually have a passion for. So I guess going back to, sorry, when you first started working, right? You were mentioning how you were at McDonald's and then Lone Star in different places. Um, when you're in those roles, did you ever have like the foresight to see of what it could become, or was it more so like you're saying, living that lifestyle, having that flexibility to pay the bills and kind of go from there?
No, it it gets to be like I said at one point. It gets to be kind of addictive. You don't know at
Yeah.
19 to 25 what exactly you're going to do. I took a couple of years off of my post-secondary education to work in the industry. One, because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I'd seen so many friends take things like political science or just an arts program and just drop out or not know what they want to do or be unhappy with that. I was a little lost in myself, like to be honest with you, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And not to say that this kind of guided me, but it gave me options. It gave me, do you want to pursue something like this, or did you want to do something in education where you can still make money? Because the one thing I say to people is what this industry does is, and I truly believe this, if people were almost mandated after high school because I was part of the double cohort, so you're dropping OAC, so it's a full year for a lot of people of high school that you don't know where you are, you don't know who you are, you don't know what you want. But if people were almost mandated to do 6 months in the industry in any capacity, that's being a barista, being a server, being a bartender, being a cook, what that did for me is it gave me a bunch of life skills that I still use to this day, and I totally stand behind it because it was one of the best things for me developing my own personality, me developing as a person. Also, it gave me some of these key tools to be able to speak in front of people at length, to really develop my thoughts, really kind of go into multitasking, which is a great life skill, communications, being able to read people, which is a huge thing, especially in this industry. It's and I think it just made some of my fundamental, like just morally and culturally, just being able like things like talking to people one on one is a skill nowadays. You don't see it because all you see is people going like this all day long,
Yeah.
all day long, and it's one of those things where it's almost like a lost art. Having to talk to somebody at the bar, they almost cringe when you do it. You know, it's just like it used to be a social situation, and I think we need to get back to some of that because it's lost on people in the society a little bit. But I know I've kind of navigated away from your original question,
No,
but
no, that's perfectly. I think you touched on some great things there, and I do agree with what you're saying, right? Where I find sometimes, like even let's say looking at my younger cousin, every time I see her and her friends are over or something, they have like an AirPod, and I always kind of I feel like the old man. I'm like, take that out. You know what I mean? Like we're chatting here, right? So no, I completely get that. And I think one of the points you touched on, just in regards to feeling lost, I think that's something maybe a lot of people listening could to relate to, right? Because I think everyone kind of gets through that, right? Where I know I have like a bunch of friends, even myself at times, you're like, hey, like I went to school for this, or this is the role I'm in now. And you're like, I don't know if I want to do this for the next, let's say, 50 years of your life, right? Everyone is kind of figuring it out, I think, to some certain extent. So I guess kind of going back to that, how did you kind of maybe, let's say, figure it out?
transition.
Yeah, transition, figure it out to an extent. And how did you maybe dive into the space a bit further? Like what gave you
I like to
that
I like to
edge?
say it was I like to say it was a combination of actual poor life choices
Yeah,
that kind of brought me to where I was today because I kept on trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Did management work for me? Mm, middle management is what it is. It's like you're never going to be at the top and making those calls and decisions. So, it, and it was tough to express some ideas sometimes in the corporate structure. So I shifted back and forth from independent to corporate because I didn't know what I wanted, and I think that showed in kind of my route. I didn't know where to go. You know, I didn't want to be part of the corporate hierarchy in the sense of I couldn't make the calls, I couldn't get certain things done, but I also didn't in the independent. I didn't own. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't a part of the final solution, the final problem in that,
yeah,
and I think that really kind of navigated me towards taking a little bit more risk on myself out there, but it eventually kind of brought me to, again, starting my own consulting company because I knew I had the fundamentals. I knew I had the tools in my toolbox to break things down. And it was successful in implementing them in stages at certain processes in corporate and independent restaurants in the industry. So I had to come up with a framework to put that all together and go to some people and knock on doors and kind of present myself as like, hey, would you be interested in this? Would you be interested in some help doing this? And because of like any good business, this whole thing is built on relationships. And I had garnered enough goodwill in this industry and relationships strong enough that people respected my opinion and would come out with it because of things I had done for certain people and things that places I've worked, and they saw the growth in those places. So that's kind of where that led me to that. But did I ever foresee myself having a distillery? No, I didn't. I had done some consulting with a local brewery called Ridge Rock here in Carp, and I had done a bunch of restaurants, and I never had done anything with distilling in general. Um, I didn't even really like gin at that time because it was always reminding me of my grandfather's gin, like very piney, and like that wasn't a flavor profile that I garnered. But what really kind of made me look at it again was stories I used to tell people during beer dinners. What started this whole intoxicating kind of industry? And Adrian kind of presented it to me one day. My partner, he's just like, and our CEO, he's just like, this is a chance to start something new and fresh. Build your own story. And you look at things like why we have IPAs. Well, we have IPAs because of the stakes. We have gin because people in the Netherlands are trying to get their soldiers drunk and their gall up to go to war. And then they brought it to the UK and everything like that. But all this stuff is built on stories. And where it really fundamentally kind of started for me in the framework for we built Dunrobin on was a commercial I saw, and it was a Johnny Walker commercial, and I recommend this commercial to everyone I saw because it taught me. It's not a secret. It's just what it just all of a sudden a moment of clarity, and it was done with a one shot view, and I think it's about a 10-minute commercial. And the actor's name that does is Robert Carlyle, and you might have seen him in the Full Monty, or if you're a trained Sprouting fan. But this commercial spoke to me just in a way that this is how to build a proper business. And he just comes down from the mountain talking about Johnny Walker and all its glory, but the simple things, it was the simple things that they touched on, why the business was successful. These simple things like a Johnny Walker label on its own, you take the label off. That's the bottle that you're going to identify and recognize. No matter where it is, it could be sitting in the snow. It's like, oh, someone enjoyed a bottle of Johnny. You know what I mean? And then it was just the process that they went through. It just spoke to me. And it was that one night at the pump, I saw this commercial, and it just kind of it always resonated in my mind. And once or twice a month, I'd watch this commercial, and it just stayed with me. Just stayed with me. So, when we were starting to develop the brand at Dunrobin, um, or when sorry, our conversations were getting into Dunrobin, I had a lot of ideas on that on how to build off those processes, and that's really what kind of led me how our bottle is designed, from our labeling, our branding, kind of be great at these things and have an approachability to people. And that's kind of what the Johnny Walker brand is. It's approachability, and it's that accessibility, and it's that iconic viewpoint that you can identify with. And that's really what it showed me. But it was that commercial that really kind of sped me up to believing I could do what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely gonna go check out that commercial, and we can even share
Yeah,
it afterwards
it's
as
it's
well. But
really cool.
yeah, yeah, no, for sure. And I guess to that point, I think one of the things that you touched on there and then answer was going back to those beer dinners, right? And I think that's when you're at beer market. Do you find maybe that was the point in your career where maybe you kind of had a flip of the switch? I think you may have touched on it where it kind of intoxicated you with the industry a tad, where maybe that's where you kind of saw the vision of what it could be, right? Or the things that you could do, or the different types of opportunities within the space.
Yeah, because it showed me because of people's reactions to it. It was the stories you told about the beer. Like if I can give a little one for a quick example, like IPA quickly blew up as one of the most craft identifying brewable beers. One, because it's an ale, which is a tough fermenting beer that doesn't need a lot of time to ferment. Two, it was a mistake. The reason why the beer was created. It's a great story. You know, when the British were invading and taking over India, they were being shipped beer across the shoehorn of Africa and all around back to India. And during the process, the beer would spoil, and they couldn't figure out a process on how to do it. And eventually, they would just stuff hops as a preservative into the beer. Now, the IBU and the ABV are completely different from what they were back then. Like they're a lot higher now, the IBU and the ABV. Um, but what it came to was, these people invading your country, they're already, you know, either don't want to be there, but their spirits and their drink is all spoiled. So you're getting like thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of British pissed off soldiers, and they started liking this beer, this hoppy profile, this hoppy taste. All came out of war and like ability to send us to this beer drinking nation that had no experience with this process before. And it all came together after like an accident and a takeover. But that's why they call it India Pale Ale. So it's just incredible. And like that's one of my favorite stories. The other one would be how stout came to be and port came like a port beer, like how those came to be is crazy. Like the porters on the River Thames, they couldn't afford like that nice clear drinking lager or nice clear crisp ale that they used to have. They drank this dank water and became known as a port beer. You know what I mean? And from that developed the stout and then the imperial stout. Like all those stories led up to that, and I love history, and that's kind of really what set me into tone with. I want to know more, and I want to know more, and I like bringing this to people and the education process, and it really kind of like spoken. You can see people's eyes really open, and I would do beer dinners for you know 10, 15 people, and then eventually 1,000 people, and they were always different no matter what. And it was always cool to see because the reaction was always the same. People love to tell those stories because people love to tell people things that they don't know. It's like when you go out to a restaurant and you sit to your friends and your friends are talking about, hey, we just went to like say the Cheshire Cat. You got to try, the sandwich that they have, or their fish and chips are out of the way. Plus, they have these beers and this wild whiskeys and this experience and atmosphere. People love to share those experiences because they like to educate their friends and their family members about these things, and we all do it. But these, yeah, and people's eyes always, it adds to an experience, and that's what life is. It's all about experiences, these little experiences, and how we can make them better. We see people wanting, to throw cocktail parties now, and they really want those intricacies in spirits and cocktails, and they really want to enhance that kind of vibe because they're adding to that atmosphere. Like I said when I talked about Moxie's, what Moxie does, I think, a lot better than a lot of places when they started here was they developed atmosphere, and that's really what brought people in. You know, so
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I think just like how you're mentioning, just how the IPA came to be, it's kind of crazy how sometimes the best things kind of come without trying, where it just kind of happens, and then it kind of just a light bulb goes off, and you kind of go on from there. And I think that's somewhat similar to you and beer dinners, right? Where it kind of opened your eyes to the different opportunities through stories and the reactions that people then have. And I
yeah,
guess,
because like
yeah,
the gin story is even crazier. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like
I
how
love.
gin
I
came
actually,
to be.
I love these stories.
Like gin started off in the Netherlands, and it started being distilled with arsenic and cyanide.
Wow, that's
Now the
crazy.
practice has reformed a lot. We don't do that anymore.
Thank God. Yeah.
But yeah, it was done to give the troops literally liquid courage. They'd take shots. You got like 18, like probably younger than that, like 17, 18, 19, 20-year old kids going to war over something that's barbaric. And eventually the Duke of Orange brought it back to the UK, and it was frowned upon by the monarchy because it was viewed as a drug. So it was in those dank parts of like those gin kind of alleys and parts of London where it was called like polecat gin, where they'd have a paw on like the side of a wall or anything like that, and you couldn't get it because cops and everyone would be chasing them out. So it was done all under the underground. And I'm summarizing the story so because I don't want to take up the entire podcast with it, but you know, people would come and they put their nickels into the slots on the side of a wall, and either put their mouth under like the spout or a camel skin, or deer skin kind of like back or a wine skin, the word I'm looking for, and they'd
Yeah.
fill
Yeah.
those up with a gin, and it was all kind of like black market dealing before it started to get regulated, and like, the queen's favorite drink was gin, like gin martinis and gin tonics. So you see how like it all developed and grew in scale, but it started off as these dirty dealings in the back alleys in the UK. Put nickels in slots and people would put their mouth literally up to the spout. So it's like
That's
it's
great.
those kind of stories and that kind of transition that I think people love to hear those experiences because
Yeah.
everything starts from a great story.
And do you find like just talking about like how people react to these stories, and I think at the same time you're talking about having these beer dinners, and you're kind of seeing the, let's say, changing of the guard, right? I think you're seeing in the mid
Mm-hmm.
'90s people are having like more into wine, right? Then you're kind of seeing the rise of craft beers. Did you kind of see
Mm-hmm.
that opportunity, be like, hey, like maybe I should dive into the space where a lot of people are maybe trying to open locations like this? I think that's what you were talking about as well.
Yeah, I first started seeing it right when I was transitioning into like the first 2 years of operation in my consulting company, and I saw the winds changing. We didn't really have an Ottawa-based distillery at the time, and what I didn't see anybody coming. And I had a lot of, and I talked to a lot of people in the industry, and it was kind of on the offset. But when we started doing it, that's when the transition started coming around. Like speakeasies were becoming a thing in Ottawa, cocktails, and you saw places like Union 613 starting to barrel age their gins and their whiskeys and their bourbons, and starting really getting into intricate cocktails and things kind of like old fashions coming back in Manhattans and Negronis, and they started to come back. You saw them starting to go on menus, so I was starting to think to my partners like, well, this could really work. Like this is where the upswing is coming into play, and everything kind of stemmed from the biggest marketplace, which is Toronto, and you saw some distilleries developing over there. But when we first applied for our license, we were the only one in Ottawa that applied for it for about 3 years. And then there was about 18 in Toronto of license on the deck to be approved by the AGCO. And we got approved, and I think at the same time, about five in the GTA got approved. Don't quote me on that, but I think it was something around there. And well, we were the only ones that were in the Ottawa area that got approved for that. Yeah. So it was kind of like we saw kind of the transition where the marketplace was going. One, because I asked a lot of questions and I talked to a lot of people in the industry and I have a lot of friends in the industry. So we kind of saw, we're like, yeah, I'd be interested in doing that. Oh, yeah, that could be cool. But it's those from those conversations that really kind of stemmed us from our transition into there. And passion from Adrian, really developing those recipes. Our Earl Grey gin, like won best gin in Canada. And then, but those were all stem from his recipes and, taking, really listening to what the people wanted, our whiskey and our vodka and everything like that. I knew what the flavor profiles should be, but he was the mastermind behind getting those set in stone. And Jonathan, just knowing how to really sell it and approach it and really kind of be that, that was sort of be like, yep, or nope, or Adam, this is too far, this is not going to work, or Adrian, this will, and, really that kind of thing that mended us all together. So it really was a partnership and a process between all of us.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I guess maybe diving into that specific more or specifically more in regards to Dunrobin, how did the ideation of it start? Was it like, I know you're saying you're having conversations and you're seeing this was something that, you know, could have a lot of let's say legs to it, but was it something
Mm-hmm.
that I don't know,
Well,
you had this
they
in
always
mind and
they always wanted to be a dark spirits company, like a brown spirits company, like
okay.
rums and whiskeys, and that was Adrian's vision for that for sure. Um, but to do that, it takes time, and the agency had an archaic kind of law where you had to you always have to age your whiskey for 3 years. That's not negotiable. But you used to have to do it in a non-bonded or sorry bonded LCBO warehouse, which cost up to $3 million. And for a startup, that's
Wow.
just can't happen. So we had a former partner that had a farm in Dunrobin, that we were able to grow the product. There was a loophole that we could grow, the two row and their winter wheat, which is the base for our whiskey, and then we didn't have to pay that bond on that. So that was kind of our loophole into it, um, where that's kind of where it started from. But that was always, excuse me, the process, and then being able to do volume. We needed to do volume, and we grew out of that facility in Dunrobin, and because of our relationship, again, going back to how important relationships were with Bose, and doing a partnership with our sanitizer with them, with their spoiled beer, garnered when they were purchased by Steam Whistle, enabled us to get a spot there for aging and capacity on a scale that we couldn't have imagined. 36,000 square feet, you can store a lot of barrels. And, right now we're looking at about almost 3,000 barrels aging and ready for the marketplace in those dark spirits. So it's taken that process this long to finally realize where we wanted to be, because in a process such as whiskeys or rums, people identify it as such, especially a rye whiskey. It's so unique, so Canadian. Where bourbon, you think American, Scotch, obviously Scotland. Those are three distinct, unique categories in whiskey, and people around the world are getting into really good ryes, really good Canadian whiskeys, and they're identifying those notes. They like that spiciness, and we saw that coming, and we wanted to get in that marketplace. People's perception of Canada is clean, it's big, you know, it's um, it's cold, but it's the purity thing that people think with when they think Canadian spirits, and those are one of the things that we've really taken advantage of, and we've been able to do dealings in Japan and Singapore, and we recently just got into a big marketplace such as Sweden. We're going to launch about 85,000 bottles of our whiskey too. So
Yeah, that's amazing. Just kind of hearing how that all came to be, and I guess before we begin to wrap it up, I just kind of have more two specific questions regarding your current role, right? So I think one of the things you touched on was the pandemic, right? For better or
Hmm.
for worse, obviously that's something that can shut down the industry, but it gave you, that time to kind of develop something that you really want to stand on. Do you find also maybe having the opportunity to do those sanitizing products that it kind of provided more of like a cash flow to the business to kind of launch it as well, and that's how you were able to kind of move forward?
100%.
Yeah.
Cash flow and relationship building. The cash flow is great, especially with a national client like Giant Tiger. That we were using. We couldn't find jugs. We couldn't find any kind of dispensing product to do it, so we ended up utilizing, um, boxed wine, the same kind of like
Yeah, yeah.
steel
The
type
bag.
kind of bladders that they use. And Giant Tiger loved them. It was not for retail sales; it was for B2B sales, just in their back end warehousing. And they were buying it up like, I don't know, like over 2,500 3-liter totes every week or every second week, shipping across Canada for us. So that enabled us to put money in the bank, and really develop that. But we needed infrastructure at that point because the farm and like 300 square foot that we were working on wasn't conducive for what we were trying to develop. So Jonathan, and again, relationships is everything, reached out to Steve Beauchamp at Bose, and because of his relationship with the Royal Oak and what they did with Bose and my relationship, I was actually the first one to put up Bose on tap in Ottawa at the Lieutenant's Pump. So he knew us a little bit, and we were able to, mostly with Jonathan's leadership, able to do a deal where we took like spoiled beer and utilized their facility to do mass production. So we did a 50-50 deal called BD Spirits. Very creative name, Dunrobin and Bose, for doing that. And then we had an expiry date on the timeline which we could license it. We license it every year, but we eventually kind of let it go as the marketplace became flooded again with sanitizer from overseas. But what that gave us is Bose was transitioning out. They were looking to, I guess, sell. I can't speak for it specifically how the whole thing went down because I wasn't privy to that, but they eventually sold to a company called Steam Whistle in Toronto, and they were moving their operation to the or Mississauga, I believe, and they gave us first right of refusal on the building. So that relationship led us to develop our upgrade of our infrastructure and scalability to produce nationally and produce our spirits and kind of garner from there, like where we couldn't have done in the farm at the rate we did it. So the spirits, or sorry, the sanitizer led to the development of higher volume of spirits because of our relationship with Bose, which stemmed from the pandemic and us producing sanitizer. So it's all on the back of that, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah. And sorry, you mentioned this deal with Bose for using their spoiled beer. What were you referencing for that?
To use it to make sanitizer, so we'd proof
Oh,
it down to
really?
get a higher alcohol content. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
we
Oh, I
proof it
didn't know
down
that.
like, yeah. So you basically had to take it down to get a higher alcohol grade from it. So you boil it down, boil it down. That I I
Yeah,
didn't have to do it. People smarter than me do it. People like
yeah,
Ryan McDonald do it, who is our head distiller, a lot smarter than me.
yeah,
Um, I'm kind of like a dog with a car. Where to go? Where to go?
yeah,
he's
yeah,
got the he's got the acumen for those little details.
yeah.
But
Very
we
cool.
grew a great product, and it was fantastic. So
Yeah.
like our
You
our hand sanitizer, the best thing about our sanitizer, and I stand by this to this day, it never cracked or broke your hands. My wife, who's in the medical field, at the general, she has to use hand sanitizer all day, and due to the amount and the quality of glycerol they use will make you crack your fingers, split and crack because you got to use it hundreds, or not hundreds of times, but maybe 100 times a day, consistently. But so the rate is do a better quality sanitizer. So ours is more expensive, but it showed in the product. We didn't have to use any stabilizing agents. We used essential oils instead of like chemicals, like any other kind of chemicals. So it was kind of higher end sanitizer. And it was higher end sanitizer, not kind of. So it would never crack or split your hands, which was great, and it didn't smell like tequila, which was another thing. It was good.
Yeah, yeah, to be honest, I remember the sanitizer was really good. It had a nice smell to it too, and to be honest, when you were saying spoiled beer, I was assuming you meant sanitizer, but I was just thinking, like, how does that work? But that's
Yeah,
just
so you,
kinda
you you
crazy.
break it. You take the facility, you break it down again I'm doing a short version of this, so
Sure.
don't people when they comment don't rate me over the coals on this one. But they break down the beer and they get it to a proof where that it's possible, and then you add a neutral based high proof alcohol to it as well, because you need to stabilize it and you need it to be a certain percentage. And to be offhand, it's been a while since I've looked at the notes. I can't remember what the actual percentage is. I think it was ours was about 86%. So you had to break it down for you had to use like an alcohol to kind of proof it down as well to mix the two together. So we're using a combination of recycled beer, alcohol, glycerol, and a little bit of peroxide in it.
Yeah, no, that's very
Yeah,
cool. And I guess the last question I have before we have our, let's say, our wrap up questions I ask every guest. Do you mind
yeah,
maybe
of
just
course.
going into what does your day to day look like? So let's say someone's tuning into the episode and they want to hear, what does Adam, Director of Business Development, do at Dunrobin Distilleries? What does that look like for you?
So I tell people business development is such a broad title in the sense of what you do. And I say people shortly that I introduce people to better people to make more decisions. Um, I utilize a lot of my networks, such as people like Matt Bennett at OSAG, people like Gunnar Lucas at On the Rocks, where and I bridge our relationships on how can we grow your brand and our brand in harmony and and benefit both from it. So I'll take things such as we just worked on a program with the Chateau Laurier, and that had done from reaching out to a lot of markets and event stuff that we had done. We had garnered the eye of her name is Genevieve, who's the general manager there, and her team. They were looking to do a gin, and they got their eye of our Earl Grey gin. So us working a function for the Golden Plates Gala, the Auto Culinary Championships. Um, they had a spark of wanting to do stuff. So my introduction to them was, yeah, we can do a custom gin for you. Let's start to develop that. So my day to day kind of changes from client interactions with people like that and developing new products like a white label Lady Zoe gin, which we just launched with the Chateau Laurier, to small things like running farmers markets and the program there for kind of our on site teams and our market events teams for anything from farmers markets to trade shows to other kind of things like tasting the glebe and everything like that. So my day really, and then I'm also on licensee sales for a lot of key accounts. Um, it stems from a lot of different things, but just touching on them all. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, that's perfect. That sounds great. I just wanted to kind of dive into that further for those listening, even myself. But yeah, no,
Yeah, it's a very broad title, but it's in the
yeah,
sense
yeah.
of like I connect people to people.
Of course, no, and to be honest, I find most of the times, someone has, let's say, a specific title, but oftentimes it's not just that one thing or this one task or that one duty, right? There's a lot of things that go under it. So no, that makes a ton of sense. And yeah, to be honest, I'm glad that we've been able to kind of get through your route and to kind of end each episode. I have two questions I like to ask everyone. So
Yeah,
sorry. I'm set. I don't know why it's been 155 episodes now, and I've always said
congratulations
I'm
on
gonna live
that.
until yeah. I've always said I'm gonna live until I'm 103. Right? I'm gonna be on a rocking chair, thinking back to all the different cool stories I've been able to have to date. Well, let's put you in that same situation, right?
Hmm.
Adam, 103-year-old on a rocking chair, thinking about all the things you've been able to do to date so far. What's maybe one story from your career that you'll think when you're on that chair at 103, you're gonna be able to remember and be like, wow, like I can't believe I got to do that for like work or for a career.
I like to say that I don't have a real job. My wife, she's got a real job where real world things happen to her day to day. I've been fortunate with the support from her and my family to be able to do something that I love. And a bad day, is something gets spilled. Something that is mislabeled or put off or we didn't get this done in time or deadlines. But it's those friendships and relationships and those things I'm going to garner and take with me and really treasure those that time I got to spend with my family because of this freedom that this job gave me. It's those on last Friday, this past Friday, I tasted 18 different whiskeys. That was my afternoon. Like, who gets to do that kind of stuff? You know, um, talk different labels and talk with the general manager of the Chateau Laurier and tell them we're going to do a gin for you, and then they want to put it in the LCBO. You know, it's doing the first uh, booze hut on the canal, first spirits available hut on the canal. Who gets to do stuff like that? You know, that's
Yeah.
the stuff I'm going to think about. Those opportunities that have this position, this career have enabled me to do. Those firsts and talking to people at those beer dinners and those experiences. That's what I'm going to think about. You know, the time I was able to go see my kids and coach my kids hockey because of the time that this thing has enabled me to give to that, and those firsts that Dunrobin's been able to really force through. But that's a really cool opportunity to be on the canal selling spirits in a bottle shop for the first time. Hopefully, there's a canal. So
Yeah, no, no. There's gonna be the canal. I live just by the canal here, and I've been looking at the weather, and it looks like it's gonna get cold. So I'm definitely gonna go check that out once it's ready.
yeah,
But no,
please.
that's amazing to hear, and yeah, not a bad afternoon. I'm sure tasting 18 different whiskeys today.
No, it was a great afternoon. A lot got done, and like I said, my hats off to Adrian Spencer and Ryan McDonald and Nikki and Chris Stewart, the whole team there. They uh, they crushed it, and our partners in Switzerland, and it's been a
Yeah,
fantastic ride, and I'm loving every minute of it.
yeah, that's fantastic. And then, not to take too much more time, but the last question I like to have every guest is, so the last question we went all the way to 103-year-old Adam,
Mm-hmm.
right? Let's go back to 16, 18-year-old version of yourself, right? Where, I don't know, you're finishing high school and then you're kind of hit with the real world. What are you going to do
Yep.
next, right? So let's say you're able to go back in time and have a chat with a younger version of yourself. What's maybe something that you've learned to date so far that you would have loved to share with the younger version of yourself? Like, hey, this is something that you need to know.
Don't stress about making mistakes. Make them big. You're gonna learn. If you keep doing
Yeah.
them, that's why you're not learning. But don't fear about screwing up. Like you're gonna, if you have a head on your shoulders and you have drive, you're gonna learn from them and you're gonna benefit from them. But don't fear of making a mistake or a change.
Yeah, that's perfect. And that's kind of the reason why I like asking that question at the very end. It's the perfect way to cap it off. I really appreciate you coming on the route. Unless there's anything you'd like to share, thank you for coming on.
That's it. Thank you so much, Chris. Really appreciate your time. I hope everything came in loud and clear, and I didn't stray too much. But
No, no, it's fantastic. Yeah, that's perfect. And to be honest, I already just as you were speaking, I'm like, I got a few people I gotta refer this episode to just right off the top. But yeah, that's it for episode 155. And thank you so much for coming on.
thank you very much, Chris. Have a great day.